Rod Laver. It all started here in 1968. Rod Laver, already a Grand Slam winner before the Open era, came back to claim his crown. Cool as you like, he outclassed Tony Roach in straight sets in the final, serving up a masterclass of touch, angles, and patience. Laver would go on to complete a calendar Grand Slam that year, becoming the only man in history to achieve it twice, in both 1962 and 1969. John Newcombe. John Newcombe won in 1967, before the Open era, with a perfect blend of serve and volley with grit and easy power, reminding everyone Australians owned grass in those days. He came back again in 1970, proving it wasn't a fluke, this time outlasting Ken Rosewall in 4 sets. To seal off his legendary status as one of the best to ever do it on grass, Newcombe grabbed his 3rd Wimbledon title in 1971, his 2nd in the Open era, and did it in style. Now, that's how you showcase dominance. Stan Smith. In 1972, Stan Smith showed up with his textbook volleys and rock-solid nerves, beating Ilia Nastase in a final full of cat-and-mouse points. Smith wasn't the flashiest guy, but when it counted, he didn't miss. Fun fact, because heavy rain wiped out the scheduled final on Saturday, the men's singles final ended up being played on Sunday. A historic first for Wimbledon. John Kodesh. Kodesh probably never dreamed of even reaching a Grand Slam final on grass, let alone winning it, but he did anyway. The year 1973 was pure chaos for tennis. Players boycotted Wimbledon, ultimately resulting in a gutted draw. And out of that mayhem emerged Jan Kodesh, steady, opportunistic, and maybe a little lucky considering the weak lineup. Either way, Cody seized his chance to lift the trophy. He's a perfect example of sometimes history just picks you no matter who you are. These opening years of the Open era set the tone of what's to come. Wimbledon was no longer just about British lawns and polite applause. It was a battlefield, and everyone wanted a piece of it. Jimmy Connors. In 1974, Jimmy Connors popped out of nowhere, brash, loud, unapologetic, and unstoppable. He bulldozed through the draw, dropping just 1 set the entire tournament, and absolutely dismantled the 39-year-old Ken Rosewall in the final. This wasn't just a win, it was a statement. The bad boy of tennis had arrived, and he wanted all of it. But the very next year, history took a sharp turn. After years in the cold, Jimmy Connors, with his scrappy, gritty, and somehow even louder energy, found his way back in 1982. After almost a decade since his first win, Connors clawed his way back to the pinnacle of tennis, beating McEnroe and then Chris Lewis in the final. It was vintage Connors, pumping fists, feeding off the crowd, and refusing to go away quietly. Yeah, just like Djokovic. Arthur Ashe. In 1975, Arthur Ashe, calm, cerebral, and strategic, pulled off one of the greatest upsets in Wimbledon history. Against Connors in the final, Ashe flipped the script. Instead of meeting fire with fire, he froze Connors out with clever slices, precision serves, and sheer intelligence. In the end, Ashe became the first black man to win Wimbledon, and he did it with pure class. Bjorn Borg. Then came Bjorn Borg, the one and only Iceman. From 1976 to 1980, Wimbledon was Borg's hunting ground. It was his second home. The Iceman from Sweden made the grass his own, winning 5 consecutive titles, something nobody had done before. At just 20 years old, Borg won his first Wimbledon without dropping a set. His relentless baseline play and machine-like composure made him look almost invincible. But his reign wasn't without drama. The 1980 final against John McEnroe became instant legend. In what's often called the greatest match ever played at that point, Borg weathered McEnroe's fire and took the 5th set 8-6. But the really unforgettable part of this match? That 4th set tiebreak. It was phenomenal. An 18-16 epic that still gets replayed every July. Over the span of 5 years, Borg turned Wimbledon into his personal playground, dominating in a way few had ever seen before. It doesn't matter who you are or what level you played. When you face Borg at Wimbledon, you're getting schooled. He had this stoic aura that helped him remain brilliant under pressure. He was a storm, a force to be reckoned with. But just like every great player in tennis, Borg's impregnable grip on the rest of the tour was shattered in 1981, not with a whisper, but with a roar. John McEnroe. John McEnroe stormed center court like a hurricane. Volatile, brilliant, and impossible to ignore. In the 1981 final, he finally dethroned Borg, snapping his 5-year streak. Borg walked off that day and never played Wimbledon again, and McEnroe officially became the new sheriff in town. For McEnroe, it wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure everyone felt it, and they sure did. His precision volleys, wicked touch, and, yes, legendary temper turned every match into theater. But McEnroe didn't have the stage all to himself. He got crushed by Jimmy Connors the following season, and that pissed him off. Never one to back down, McEnroe came back with a vengeance, winning again in 1983 and 1984, each time reminding everyone why he was both loved and hated. That 1984 final, one of the most dominant performances Wimbledon had ever seen. Straight sets, barely giving Connors a chance to breathe. This era was less about grace and more about grit. Borg had been the ice. McEnroe and Connors were pure fire. The crowd didn't just watch these finals. They lived and loved every second of the chaos. Boris Becker. Just when you thought you'd seen it all, Wimbledon found its next star, and he was still in high school. In 1985, a 17-year-old German named Boris Becker, with a wild mop of hair and a serve like a cannon, came out of nowhere to win Wimbledon. Diving all over the grass, firing rockets from the baseline, Becker became the youngest men's champion in history and the first unseeded player to win it. And he did it with the swagger of someone who clearly didn't get the memo about nerves. He defended his title in 1986, proving he wasn't just a one-summer wonder, but Wimbledon wasn't done making new heroes yet. Pat Cash. In 1987, it was Pat Cash's turn. The Australian won hearts, not just with the way he beat Yvonne Lendl in the final, but with the way he climbed into the stands afterward to hug his family and coaches. That gesture has since become tradition. Known as the man with the headband and the beautiful charisma, Cash made his mark. Stefan Edberg. Then came Stefan Edberg, the smooth, understated Swede who made serve-and-volley tennis look like poetry. Edberg won his first Wimbledon in 1988, beating Becker in a final that kicked off a trilogy of classic Wimbledon finals between the two. Over the next few years, the Becker-Edberg rivalry would light up center court. Becker reclaimed the crown in 1989, overpowering everyone in his path. Then Edberg took it back in 1990, outfoxing Becker with soft hands and graceful movement. Michael Stick. In 1991, Michael Stick added his name to the list, another German, quiet and precise, stunning Becker in the final. Andre Agassi. And then, in 1992, a shock that reverberated across tennis happened. At that point in tennis, a baseliner on grass was almost non-existent. But Andre Agassi? He showed the world it was possible. With his neon clothes and fearless returns, Agassi beat Goran Ivanisevic in a tense 5-set thriller. It was a victory years in the making. Agassi had struggled on grass for much of his early career, but in 1992, he finally cracked the code. This era had it all: power, grace, rivalries, and the kind of finals you still talk about decades later. But you know one of the most beautiful things about tennis? The best was yet to come. Pete Sampras. In 1993, Sampras claimed his first Wimbledon title with a deadly combination of precision serving, crisp volleys, and nerves of steel. From that moment on, grass seemed almost custom-made for him. For the next 8 years, Sampras was the guy. He won Wimbledon 7 times. 1993 to 1995, then again from 1997 to 2000, losing only once in 1996 to a red-hot Richard Krajicek. On grass, his serve and volley game was untouchable, his demeanor icy, his focus absolute. In 1995, he faced Becker in a thunderous final, a heavyweight clash of champions. Sampras took it in 4, proving he was the new ruler of center court. In 1999, he dismantled Agassi in straight sets, showing that even the most dazzling baseline artistry couldn't penetrate his fortress. And in 2000, he equaled Roy Emerson's record of 12 Grand Slam titles. Visibly emotional, realizing he'd cemented his place in history. But even Pete's reign wasn't without its surprises. One thing was clear though, Sampras didn't just dominate Wimbledon, he defined an era. Cool under pressure, brutally efficient, and nearly unbeatable on grass. He left center court with 7 titles, a legacy of greatness, and more than a few opponents wondering if they'd ever stand a chance. Richard Krajicek. Out of nowhere, in 1996, Richard Krajicek, a Dutchman with a booming serve and quiet confidence, handed Sampras his only Wimbledon loss of the decade in the quarters and went on to win the title. It was a vicious reminder that even kings can bleed. He became the first, and still only, Dutchman to win Wimbledon. Goran Ivanišević. After 3 excruciatingly painful runner-ups, Goran Ivanišević finally snapped his losing streak at Wimbledon in 2001, defeating Patrick Rafter in the final. Winning the title as the 125th player in the world made this achievement extraordinary for Ivanišević. He became the first unseeded player to win Wimbledon since Boris Becker in 1985, and the first and only wildcard to win a men's singles major. Oh, and he jumped from 125 to 16 in the ranking, a massive leap no one saw coming. Goran didn't win any other major in his memorable career, but the one he won in style. Lleyton Hewitt. Lleyton Hewitt became Wimbledon champ in 2002, blasting David Nalbandian with a crushing 6-1, 6-3, 6-2 scoreline. He dominated the poor guy from start to finish in what would be his second and last major title, coming 1 year after his US Open triumph in 2001. Oh, and he was the first Australian to win the title since his compatriot Pat Cash in 1987. Aussie heritage. Roger Federer. After Sampras stepped away, center court fell quiet, but not for long. In 2003, a 21-year-old Swiss maestro named Roger Federer walked onto the grass and never really left. In 2003, Federer won his first Wimbledon, sweeping past Mark Philippoussi in a display of flawless tennis. The serve, the footwork, the one-handed backhand, it was like watching art in motion, and so began his reign. For the next 5 years, 2003 to 2007, Federer owned Wimbledon, literally. He won 5 straight titles, equaling Borg's record, and did it with such grace it almost seemed effortless. In 2007, he outlasted Rafael Nadal in a tense 5-setter. His 5th consecutive crown, once again beating Nadal in a classic showdown, just like the year before. But then came 2008, and the match that still leaves fans breathless. Rafael Nadal, Federer's greatest rival, finally broke through. In an epic 5-set marathon, full of rain delays, momentum swings, and impossible rallies, Nadal dethroned Federer in near darkness, winning 9-7 in the final set. Many still call it the greatest match in tennis history. Federer returned the following year in 2009, reclaiming the crown in another 5-set classic, this time against Andy Roddick, winning 16-14 in the final set. It was his 15th Grand Slam title, surpassing Sampras, and a clear signal. The king was far from done. He'd win again in 2012, beating Andy Murray and breaking British hearts, but cementing his place as Wimbledon's greatest champion. At least for now. During this era, Federer brought poetry to the grass, Nadal brought fire, and Wimbledon became the theater of their rivalry, a place where even perfection wasn't always enough. Rafael Nadal won Wimbledon again in 2010 without much fuss. He flipped Tomas Berdych in 4 sets, completing the Channel Slam for the second time in his career. Ironically, it was Berdych who defeated Federer in the quarters. If he hadn't, it probably would have been a Federer-Nadal final. One of many what-ifs in tennis. Novak Djokovic. In 2011, Djokovic finally cracked the code. After years of knocking on the door, he beat Nadal in the final and claimed his first Wimbledon crown. His return game was unmatched, his movement on grass absurd, and just like that, the Big Three became the Big Four. From there, Novak kept coming. In 2014, he stopped Federer in an unforgettable 5-set thriller. In 2015, he did it again, silencing the crowd with ice-cold precision. And after a brief lull, he came roaring back in 2018, beating Kevin Anderson and reminding everyone he was far from finished. But the 2019 final? That one belongs in history books. Against Federer, Djokovic saved 2 championship points in the longest Wimbledon final ever, winning 13-12 in a 5th-set tiebreak that left everyone gasping. Then came 2021, where he equaled Federer and Nadal at 20 Grand Slam titles, beating Matteo Berrettini in 4 sets. And in 2022, he added a 7th Wimbledon crown, joining Sampras and just 1 behind Federer. But it wasn't just Novak stealing the spotlight. Andy Murray, the hometown hero, finally lifted the trophy in 2013, ending Britain's 77-year drought with an emotional win over Djokovic. Then, in 2016, Murray did it again, taking down serve monster Milos Raonic as the center court crowd erupted in joy. This era belonged to the Big Four. Andy Murray battled injury later on and was not so fortunate to have peaked in the era of Nadal, Joker, and Roger. But he is a legend, an icon who achieved what was thought impossible in British tennis. Carlos Alcaraz. The Big Four was fading out, and tennis needed to pass the torch. This time it went to a Spanish boy named Carlos Carlito Alcaraz. At just 20 years old, Alcaraz stormed through the draw, facing none other than Novak Djokovic, the man who hadn't lost a final on center court in almost a decade. And what a final it was! Alcaraz's fearless power and dazzling drop shots clashed with Djokovic's relentless defense in a 5-set thriller. In the end, Alcaraz stood tall, smiling through the tears, becoming the youngest Wimbledon champion since Boris Becker and proving that the future had arrived. Alcaraz will go on to defend his Wimbledon title in 2024, this time against the same relentless old man, Djokovic. Jannik Sinner. When Jannik Sinner arrived at Wimbledon, there was a lot of doubt about his state of mind. He had just lost a 5-set thriller against his arch-rival, Carlos Alcaraz. But it's not just about losing the match, it's about how he lost it. Sinner had 3 consecutive match points to win in straight sets, but he couldn't take it. In his first tournament on grass following the final, Sinner got uncharacteristically outwitted by Alexander Bublik, casting more doubts about his capability of winning Wimbledon. But then, just 35 days after that heartbreaking loss, Jannik Sinner steamrolled his opponents to set up a rematch of Roland Garros with Carlos Alcaraz. And this time, he took it in 4 sets, effectively breaking the stranglehold Carlos had on him. If he had lost, it would have been 6 consecutive losses against the Spanish prince, which could be tragic mentally. It's important to note that Sinner had some help in reaching that final. He was 2 sets down to the imperious grass quarter, Grigor Dimitrov, in the 4th round, and he probably would have lost the match if Dimitrov hadn't retired due to injury. You could argue Sinner deserved some luck, though, considering the brutal manner in which he lost the French Open final. But he also had to contend with the evergreen Novak Djokovic in the semi, destroying him in straight sets like it was nothing. Sinner dominated Carlos for much of the final too, destroying Alcaraz's serve and making it impossible for him to impose his game. That makes it 2 consecutive Grand Slam finals these two have met. Don't count them out of pulling it off again at the US Open. They are effectively the big 2 of the new era. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe to the channel because I'll be posting a lot here. Until next time.